Nebraska has made a couple massive coaching hires over the past couple months, bringing in new names on both sides of the football. So in today's video, it's finally time to step back, analyze, and grade every single Husker coaching move. Who is our best hire? What coach has the most to prove? What is a sleeper move by the Big Red? And everything else you need to know. So really quick, we have a lot to get into. Hey, if you're having a good day, because I know I am, hit that like button. And also, if you're a diehard Nebraska fan, you're unsubscribed, what are you waiting for? We post daily Husker football content, recruiting updates, analysis just like this, practice updates, so much more. So join this family of over 11,000 strong. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. But without further ado, let's get into it, grading and analyzing every single Nebraska coaching move over the past couple months. There's a lot of shakeup on this Nebraska coaching staff. A couple guys fired and a lot of guys hired. So I want to get things started with the offensive brand new coaches. There's only one. Nebraska's new wide receivers coach, Ekeler Shorts Jr., coming in from Kentucky, was previously with Dana Holgorsen at both West Virginia as a player and at Houston. He was an A-plus hire for Nebraska. I'm a big Ekeler Shorts guy, and he's already went to work since he's been at Nebraska on the recruiting trail. He single-handedly was the reason we brought in the receivers we did. Okay, he brought in Dane Key, who is a top 5 receiver in SEC football, who's going to be an NFL draft pick next spring. Like, people at this point, I think, are underrating how good of a player Dane Key is. Like, we just got ourselves one. We got ourselves one of them ones at wide receiver. That's thanks to the Ekeler Shorts. We got an Isaiah Hunter, who was Cal's Ja'Cory Barney, breakout guy. Okay, we got Hardly Gilmore, who was a 17-year-old phenom for the Wildcats. And those were only the transfers that he brought in so far. Okay, he's on the recruiting trail, getting guys like Ryan Mosley on an official visit, who is a very high 4-star receiver. Jabari Brady, who's a 5-star receiver. So from a recruiting standpoint, he checks almost every single box. From a youth standpoint, that's very important for these positional coaches. He checks that box. I think it's important for a wide receivers coach to be youthful, to be relatable, to be a former player. Yeah, Garrett McGuire, our pass receiver coach, he had that check, but he wasn't a wide receiver. He was a quarterback. So how can you relate to these guys? Ekeler Shorts was a phenomenal wide receiver at West Virginia. So from that standpoint, he checks the box. We haven't seen him as a coach necessarily in practice yet, but from the things we've heard at Kentucky and Houston, he's going to check that box too because he's energetic. He expects a lot of these guys. He's a player's coach. Really like Ekeler Shorts. That was a home run hire by Nebraska, man. And we're already reaping the rewards of that move. So Ekeler Shorts gets us started with a strong A+, the only new name on this offensive coaching staff. Well, I mean, Dana Holgorsen's, I guess, a new name, but we're not going to grade him because he was here basically in the fall. All right, let's get to the defensive positional coaches, the brand new ones, because there's a bunch of new names here. On the defensive line, replacing Terrence Knighton is former Chiefs assistant defensive line coach Terry Bradden. This, in my opinion, gets a B+ hire. Now, Terry Bradden has a phenomenal track record. Okay, with the Chiefs, they've had one of the best defensive lines in all the NFL. Okay, developing guys like George Karlaftis, Chris Jones, Frank Clark, a couple other guys in there. So from a developmental standpoint, he checks the box. From a personality standpoint, he checks that box. Like, I understand he hasn't been in college before, and it's adjustment going from NFL to college. He's now also never recruited before. But I will tell you this about recruiting. You don't really need to know how to recruit. Terrence Knight had no idea how to recruit. And then he turned out to be one of the Nebraska's best recruiters in the span of a year. It's not really an art. You don't need to learn it. Okay? It's just about being a relatable person and to be persistent. That's what you get here with Terry Bradden. And he has that experience. Like, he can just tell his defensive lineman, like, he'll call up 4-star Titan Davis and say, hey, Titan, you want to go to the NFL? I've developed the best of them. Come to Nebraska. I think that's important that Terry Bradden's had that background. So I really like this hire. Now, again, there's some questions with him not being in college before. So that's the reason it's not an A hire. But it's a good move to have a guy with NFL background who's developed some of the best of them, who's still particularly young and can rise to the ranks in college. So like Terry Bradden, he gets a B hire. Let's talk about Philip Simpson next, who is our outside linebackers coach. I mean, he can pretty much coach whatever position. More than anything, he's a recruiter. That's why we hired him, to be a glorified recruiter. to bring back that Nebraska connection that he did in 2023. If you're not familiar with Phil Simpson, we hired him from Florida State. He was with Nebraska in 2023, went to Florida State, and then went back to Nebraska. Okay. Philip Simpson gets an A+ hire. Like, you guys already know how I feel about Philip Simpson, man. You want to know why we got Jacory Barney, Vincent Shavers, Willis McGahee, some of our best players who are going to be a cornerstone of this team over the next couple of years. And that wasn't because of Matt Rhule. It wasn't because of Dylan Rhule. Like, Dylan Rhule, it had nothing to do with Dylan Rhule. It wasn't even because of Tony White. It's because of Philip Simpson. Okay, if you're not familiar with his background, he was a former coach in the Florida area. He knows all these coaches. He knows all these players. He was the reason we got all those boys. And if Philip Simpson probably didn't come back, some of those guys might have transferred out. So not only are you bringing back, a guy who will bring back that connection in Nebraska, but you might have just saved Vincent Shavers from transferring out or Willis McGahee from transferring out. I mean, that's not set in stone, but he has that good of a connection with those guys where, that's huge that he's coming back and he's going to continue to bring in these Florida ballers who have been really playing good for Nebraska. So A+ hire to bring him back. You guys already know how I feel about that. Let's get to our new secondaries coach, Addison Williams. We brought him in from Central Florida. He was previously their co-defensive coordinator along with secondary coach. Addison Williams gets a B-. Now, he has a phenomenal history, phenomenal track record. He's a good recruiter, particularly in Georgia, Florida, East Coast. I really like that about Addison Williams. And from a positional coach standpoint, I really only cared about recruiting. Because the developmental side, I think the offensive coordinators handle that. The defensive coordinators handle that. The head coach handles that. The strength and conditioning coach handles that. So from a recruiting standpoint, checks every single box. I will say, I think Central Florida secondary, when watching it on film, when really diving into it a couple of weeks after we hired this guy, their secondary did struggle a little bit. But he's produced a lot of good players, guys who went off to the NFL. Had a couple guys in the Senior Bowl a couple weeks ago that really played well as well. So I think Addison Williams is a B- hire. There's some question marks there, but I feel good about his recruiting, man. All these guys are good recruiters. Matt Rhule knows how important that is. Feel good about what Addison Williams already done, too. He's recruited a lot of good guys from Florida. So, like that hire, B-. Just something to prove there. It's not an A+, but really, really like it. To round everything out, let's get to our brand new special teams coordinators announced earlier this week. Mike Ekeler. Mike Ekeler, former Nebraska coach in the Bo Pelini era, went all over, had stops at Georgia. But he's been with Tennessee over the past couple years as their special teams coordinator and linebackers coach. And he returns to his home state to coach Nebraska special teams. This is an A+ hire. It's not even debatable. It's an A+ hire, A++ hire, right? One of the best special teams coaches in America. He checks every box. Okay, he's a great special teams coach. He's a great recruiter. And I know Matt Rhule said that the special teams coach wasn't going to be a recruiter. But if you look at Mike Ekeler's history, at Tennessee, he landed 1 5-star, 15 4-stars. He brought multiple guys to the NFL. He developed James Pierce, who's going to be a first-round draft pick. I know Matt Rhule said that, our new special teams coach is not going to be a recruiter, but you gotta change that now that you hired Mike Ekeler, because he's a phenomenal recruiter. It's like having a Ferrari in the garage but not driving it. Why would you have a phenomenal recruiter on the staff and not have him recruit? So I think Mike Ekeler is going to recruit for the Huskers now that we hired him. So you like that. He's energetic, one of the most energetic coaches I've ever seen. There's clips of him out there with his face bleeding, yelling, going crazy, running down the sideline. That's important. He demands physicality and excellence at every position. He's not going to waver. He's a guy who looks like he can go out there and play football right now. That's the difference. Like, our old special teams coach, Ed Foley, that dude could not play the offensive line. Looked like an offensive lineman, but he couldn't play on that offensive line. Mike Ekeler, man, he's fit, dude. Like, he looks like he can play. And that's important. That's important. Mike Ekeler checks every single box, man. Like this hire. A+. A+, 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 A+. So, those are Nebraska's brand new hires. Again, John Butler, we're not going to talk about that because he was with Nebraska last year. Dane Hoiberg kind of the same way, but I like all of these hires from Nebraska. Like, Matt Rhule hit it outside the park, and we had a lot to replace. Tony White was a good defensive coordinator. Okay, Terrence Knight was a good, really, really good coach on the D-line. We had a lot to replace, and Matt Rhule improved the staff somehow. He improved the staff. Really, really happy with this offseason for Nebraska. We hired a bunch of good coaches. Those are my grades. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Grading every single Nebraska coaching hire. What are your thoughts? Let me know what your grades are in the comment section. Absolutely want to hear what you have to say. Hey, if you made this far in the video, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe as always, folks. Go Big Red. Go Matt Rhule. See you in the next one.